What if the person you're meant to fall in love with has been right beside you all along? Not some stranger in a coffee shop, not a swipe on a screen, but your best friend. This is Jake's story, a driven med school hopeful, and Connor, a free-spirited photographer. For 3 years, they were just roommates, until one night changed everything. What happens when friendship blurs into something more? Keep listening, because this isn't just a love story. It's a leap of courage, and maybe it's yours too. They say opposites attract, but sometimes they also just click. Jake was never the guy you'd expect to end up with a free spirit for a roommate. A pre-med student from Boston, he lived life in outlines, study schedules, and color-coded notes. Jake had a plan for everything, from what time to eat, to when he'd take his MCATs, to how many hours he needed to sleep to maximize brain retention. And then came Connor. Connor was sunshine wrapped in denim. A photography major from Colorado who walked into their sophomore dorm room barefoot, holding a camera and a coffee. In that order. No schedule, no rush, just vibes. They shouldn't have worked, but within weeks, they did. Connor introduced Jake to late-night walks, rooftop stargazing, and the kind of deep 2 a.m. conversations that only happen when you're brave enough to ask, "Are you really happy?" Jake helped Connor file his taxes, set calendar reminders, and actually show up on time to class, sometimes. They were different, but their friendship didn't ask them to change. It simply invited them to belong. Over the next 3 years, their lives intertwined in ways that felt effortless. They were the kind of best friends who could sit in silence for hours, lost in their own worlds but somehow still together, who shared playlists, inside jokes, and leftover takeout like it was a love language. Who could predict each other's moods from just one word, or the lack of one? And when college ended, moving in together wasn't a big decision. It was the only one that made sense. Rent in Denver was steep, but split between 2 friends. Manageable. Jake could study for med school, and Connor could build his photography business. Easy. What they didn't realize is how the comfort they shared, that soft, lived-in kind of intimacy, would start to blur lines they never thought they'd question. Because something happens when you spend every day with someone who sees you. Not just your good days. Not just your filtered photos, but your tired eyes, your Sunday morning hair, your worst insecurities, and they stay. Connor would walk around the apartment in boxers without a second thought, laughing with the bathroom door open, completely unbothered. Jake would pretend not to notice, at first. But then he did. Not in a dramatic, sweeping thunderbolt kind of way. It was slower. Quieter. In the way Connor's laugh would fill the room and make Jake look up. In the way he said Jake's name like it mattered. In the scent of cedar and film chemicals that lingered every time Connor passed behind him. Jake started catching himself watching, noticing, feeling. But feelings like that, especially when they come from someone you thought was just a friend, are tricky, especially when you're not sure what they mean. Or if the other person feels it too. So Jake did what a lot of us do when something feels too real. He buried it. Covered it in logic, medical school stress, lack of sleep. Anything but what it really was. The beginning of something new, something terrifying, something undeniable. And maybe, deep down, Connor was doing the same. Maybe he was just as scared to name what was growing between them, scared to lose the friendship they'd built, brick by brick, over 3 solid years. But when connection is that real, it doesn't disappear. It waits, and eventually, it asks to be seen. This is where things begin to shift. Slowly at first, a lingering glance, a touch that feels warmer than it should. A question left hanging in the air, and then one moment, one quiet, unspoken moment, threatens to change everything. Because sometimes, love doesn't arrive as a grand gesture. Sometimes it comes dressed in sweatpants, holding 2 mugs of coffee, asking, "You okay?" Coming up, the night that changed everything, and the choice that could either deepen everything they had, or break it entirely. Change doesn't always come with fireworks. Sometimes it sneaks in like a draft under the door. Quiet, persistent, impossible to ignore once you feel it. For Jake, that change began the night Connor sat beside him on the couch, just a little closer than usual. It wasn't new. They'd shared space like this 100 times before. But that night, Jake couldn't focus on the textbook in his lap. His eyes kept drifting sideways, watching Connor edit photos on his laptop, his brow furrowed, his mouth twitching in concentration. Connor looked up and caught him staring. "You're overthinking again," he said with a grin, tapping the space between Jake's brows. "Right there. That little wrinkle always gives you away." Jake laughed, a soft, nervous sound. "Just stressed about the MCAT," he lied, as casually as he could manage. Connor didn't buy it. He studied Jake's face for a long second, the kind of look that felt less like being watched and more like being read. "I know you better than that," he said quietly. And maybe that was part of the problem, because Connor did know him, knew when Jake was spiraling, knew when he needed space, knew what kind of ramen he liked when he was sick, and what music calmed him down during all-night study marathons. And now, Connor knew something else. Even if he didn't have the words for it yet, Jake felt it the moment Connor reached out. Just a hand on his arm, nothing dramatic, but the warmth of that touch spread like wildfire. It made Jake hyper-aware of every nerve in his body, every beat of his heart. For a moment, he couldn't breathe. This wasn't friendship. Not anymore. Jake pulled away, gently, but fast. "I'm just tired," he muttered, already standing, already retreating to his room. But the space he thought he needed didn't bring peace. That night, lying in the dark, Jake replayed that touch over and over again. Not just the physical contact, but the expression on Connor's face. Soft, curious, a little afraid. Like maybe he was feeling it too. And if he was, what did that mean? The next few days passed with a strange tension in the air. Nothing was said. Everything had changed. Connor didn't push, but his actions spoke. The casual touches became more frequent. A hand on Jake's shoulder when passing behind him, fingers brushing when handing over coffee. Little things, innocent on the surface, but Jake noticed every single one. He noticed the way Connor looked at him now, a little longer than necessary. The way his voice softened when he said his name. The way he lingered in the doorway after saying goodnight, as if waiting for Jake to say something, anything. And Jake? He was unraveling quietly. His thoughts were a mess of questions and what-ifs. What if this was real? What if it wasn't? What if he made a move and lost everything? The friendship, the safety, the history. But what if he didn't, and lost something even bigger? Then came the morning that tipped the scales. They were sitting at their tiny kitchen table, sunlight pooling across the floor. Connor was editing photos. Jake was pretending to study. In truth, he was watching Connor, again, captivated by how the light made the gold flecks in his eyes shimmer. "You've been weird lately," Connor said, not looking up. Jake stiffened. "Weird how?" "Jumpy," Connor replied, now glancing at him with a crooked smile. "Like you're afraid I'm going to bite you." Jake chuckled awkwardly. "Should I be offended?" "Don't be ridiculous," Connor said, patting his lap playfully. "Come here. You used to sit on the arm of my chair all the time. Now you act like I'm radioactive." Jake froze. He couldn't tell if Connor was teasing or testing. And then Connor asked softly, "What's going on with you?" The answer sat heavy in Jake's chest, unspoken. He wanted to tell him, wanted to say, "I think about you too much. I notice things I shouldn't. I don't know what's happening, but it scares me." Instead, his silence stretched. And then, mercifully, Connor's phone rang. He answered, speaking to a client. Jake took the chance to disappear. But moments later, Connor was knocking on his door again. Sitting on the edge of Jake's bed, voice calm, eyes sincere. "She wants those romantic shots," Connor said, talking about the engagement photos. The kind that capture what people look like when they're falling in love. And he said it while looking at Jake. Not like a friend, not like a joke, but like a man trying to say something he couldn't put into words. Jake felt his stomach drop. "I've been thinking," Connor continued, his voice lower now, "about what that really looks like." He was close now, too close. Jake could smell the faint scent of cedar and clean laundry. He could feel the warmth radiating between them. "I should get back to studying," Jake said, even though neither of them believed that was what he wanted. "Should you?" Connor asked. And it wasn't about the studying. It was a challenge, an invitation, a plea. Then Connor reached out, gently cupping Jake's cheek, his thumb tracing a line that sent shivers down his spine. "Jake," he whispered, "look at me." And Jake did. And in Connor's eyes, he saw the reflection of his own fear. And something else. Certainty. Connor's hand slid to the back of Jake's neck. And in that moment, something shifted completely. The friendship, beautiful, solid, safe, cracked open. And behind it, something raw and real and waiting. "Connor," Jake began, but he didn't know how to finish the sentence. "I know," Connor said. "This is scary." "It scares me too." They were both trembling, in different ways, but neither moved away. "What are we doing?" Jake finally asked. Connor smiled, soft and sad and hopeful. "I don't know, but I can't pretend anymore. I can't keep acting like this is just friendship." The confession didn't feel like a wrecking ball. It felt like a release. Jake wanted to run. He also wanted to stay, and then Connor leaned in, slowly, carefully, and Jake didn't pull back. Their lips met. It was soft, tentative, questioning. But it was real. And when they pulled apart, breathless and stunned, they both knew there was no going back. Because some lines are meant to protect us, but some are meant to be crossed. They say the hardest part isn't the kiss, it's everything that comes after. Jake didn't sleep much that night. After the kiss, after the quiet, after Connor left the room without a word, the silence was deafening. Not the kind of silence that comforts, but the kind that begs to be broken. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, his mind racing. Questions, doubts, flashes of Connor's face, the closeness of their bodies, the warmth still lingering on his skin. Had it really happened? Had he imagined it? Had he ruined everything? But even with the fear, Jake didn't feel regret. What he felt was a kind of aching clarity, like something had been out of focus for a long time, and now he was seeing it clearly, maybe for the first time. The morning sun filtered through his window, soft and golden, and then he felt it. Connor's arm draped across his waist, his breath warm against Jake's neck. They had fallen asleep like that, together, somehow, without another word, without a plan, without knowing what came next. And it felt right. Jake didn't move at first. He just stayed there, still, breathing it in. The simplicity of it, the weight of it, the impossibility of undoing it. Then Connor stirred, mumbling something sleepily before pulling Jake just a little closer. "Morning," he whispered. Jake turned, expecting awkwardness. Maybe avoidance, maybe panic. But Connor just looked at him and smiled. Not a big smile, a small one, quiet. Real. "Hey," Jake said softly. They stared at each other for a second too long. Then Connor reached out, brushing a strand of hair from Jake's forehead. "How are you feeling?" he asked. Jake blinked, trying to find the right words. "Confused," he admitted. "Scared, happy, all at once." Connor nodded slowly. "Yeah, that sounds about right." He sat up, the sheet falling to his waist, and Jake couldn't help but notice how natural it all felt, how unforced. Like this wasn't the beginning of something chaotic, but the uncovering of something that had always been there, waiting. Jake sat up too, pulling the blanket with him. He looked down at his hands, then back at Connor. "I thought you'd say it was a mistake," he said. Connor's expression softened. "I thought you might." "I almost did," Jake confessed. "But I can't." Connor looked at him then, really looked at him. "Jake, I didn't come in here last night expecting this to happen. I didn't plan it. But I'm not sorry it did." Jake's chest tightened. "You're not? Are you?" Connor asked. There was a pause. A heavy one. Jake shook his head. "No." "I don't regret it." Relief passed across Connor's face like a cloud moving out of sunlight. And then he laughed. A soft, nervous, almost disbelieving laugh. "Okay," he said. "Good. Because I've been in love with you for longer than I want to admit." The room stood still. Jake stared. "You... what?" Connor took a breath. "I know it sounds crazy, and I know we've been friends for years. But somewhere along the line, it stopped feeling like friendship to me. I tried to ignore it. I tried to act normal. But every time you laughed, every time you touched my shoulder without thinking, every time I saw you fall asleep on the couch with your med books open, I knew." Jake swallowed hard. His heart was pounding. "How long?" he asked. "How long have you felt this way?" Connor smiled. That same lopsided grin that had always undone Jake in small, quiet ways. "Since we moved in, maybe longer." "Why didn't you say anything?" "Because you're my best friend," Connor said. "Because I was terrified. Of losing you, of ruining what we had." Jake was quiet, processing. "And then, I love you too." Connor froze. Jake exhaled like he'd been holding it in for weeks. "I've been trying not to. Trying to convince myself it was just a phase, or that I was reading into things. But I love you, Connor." Connor reached for him, his hands gentle, like Jake might disappear. "You're serious?" he asked. Jake nodded. "I've never been more sure of anything that scared me this much." They laughed, not because it was funny, but because the release was overwhelming, like breathing after holding it in too long. And then Connor leaned in again. This time the kiss was deeper, surer. It didn't ask permission, it answered a question. When they finally pulled away, Jake looked at him. "So, what now?" Connor tilted his head. "Now we figure it out, together. One day at a time." Jake smiled. "What if we mess it up?" Connor's fingers intertwined with his. "What if we don't?" And that was the beginning of something new. Not a reckless plunge into chaos, but a slow, deliberate step into something honest, real, unfolding. They didn't have all the answers, but they had each other, and that was a start. Because love doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers, and when we're ready to listen, really listen, it's been saying our name the whole time. Some moments don't feel real when they're happening. They settle in slowly, like morning light filtering through a window. Quiet, warm, undeniable. Jake sat there on his bed, Connor's fingers intertwined with his. The air between them was thick with everything unsaid. Years of friendship, months of unspoken feelings, a single night that changed the shape of their world. They had kissed. They had admitted it. They had said the words, "I love you," and meant them. But what now? Jake's mind kept circling that question. Was this just one beautiful, terrifying moment suspended in time? Or was it the beginning of something real? Something worth risking everything for? Connor seemed to sense the question even before Jake said it out loud. "We don't have to figure it all out right now," he said softly, his thumb brushing over Jake's hand. "We just have to be honest and keep showing up." It was such a simple thing to say, and yet it felt like the bravest promise Jake had ever heard. That night, they didn't talk much more. They lay there side by side, not touching, but not needing to. The silence wasn't heavy this time. It was full. Jake fell asleep to the steady rhythm of Connor's breathing beside him, and for the first time in weeks, his heart didn't feel like it was at war with itself. The morning after, though, that was something else entirely. He woke up before Connor. Sunlight spilled through the curtains, and Connor's arm was thrown lazily across his waist, his face nuzzled against Jake's shoulder like it had always belonged there. Jake stared at the ceiling, trying to absorb what had happened, and what hadn't. There was no regret, just a low, buzzing kind of awe. He was in unfamiliar territory now, and it thrilled and terrified him in equal measure. Connor stirred beside him and let out a low, sleepy hum. Morning. Jake glanced down at him. Hey. Connor blinked slowly, then sat up, rubbing his eyes. Still here? Jake smirked. Still here. There was a pause. I was half convinced you'd run, Connor admitted, voice still rough from sleep. I thought about it, Jake said honestly. But then you grabbed me like I was a human body pillow and wouldn't let go. Connor laughed, that same laugh that had always made Jake's chest feel too small. Sounds like me. And just like that, the tension broke. They got up slowly, made coffee, stumbled through small talk and sideways glances. Everything was normal, and nothing was. Jake caught himself watching Connor pour cream into his mug and thought, I get to love him now. Out loud. And then just as quickly, but what if we mess this up? Later that morning, Jake sat on the couch, textbook in hand but eyes unfocused. Connor walked in, holding his camera gear. I have a shoot later, he said, sitting beside Jake. Engagement photos, romantic ones. Jake nodded. You're good at those. Connor tilted his head. You think so? Jake looked at him. You don't just take pictures. You see people. You capture the parts of them they're afraid to show. Connor smiled, slow and soft. That's what I want to do with you. Jake's breath caught. Connor continued. Not just photograph you, I mean, see you. Really be with you. Not in secret. Not halfway. I know this might get messy, but I don't want to pretend anymore. Jake set his book down. He knew the risks. He knew the stakes. But in that moment, all he could think was, what if the risk is worth it? He reached over, took Connor's hand. Okay, he said. Let's stop pretending. That night, they didn't sleep in separate rooms. They didn't tiptoe around what they felt. They leaned into it, fully, deliberately. And it wasn't just physical. It was emotional, tender, transformative. Connor held Jake like someone he'd been waiting for. Jake let himself be held like someone who finally felt safe. For the first time, they let themselves fall. The next few days brought questions, from themselves, from the world around them. Were they a couple now? Were they telling people? Were they ready for all the opinions, the assumptions, the scrutiny? But those questions, while important, didn't matter as much as one thing. They were choosing each other. Daily. Quietly. Boldly. And that choice, repeated in every small moment, was what made the difference. When Connor got a call offering him a photography contract for a high-profile wedding in Aspen, Jake was the first person he told. And when Connor said, "They want those photos that show what love really looks like," Jake didn't hesitate. "You know what that looks like now," he said. Connor smiled. "Yeah, I do." Because crossing the line wasn't just about one kiss. It was about every moment after. Every morning they chose each other again. Every fear they didn't run from. Every truth they were brave enough to speak aloud. For Jake and Connor, the days following that night weren't a fairy tale montage. There was no dramatic music, no fireworks lighting up the sky. What they had now wasn't built in bursts. It was built in the quiet. In the morning, coffee poured without asking. In shared glances across the living room, no longer loaded with confusion, but full of silent agreement. "I see you. I'm here." The shift between them was subtle but undeniable. Friends first, always. But now, Their connection carried something deeper, a shared tenderness, a new kind of gravity. They didn't make a big announcement. They didn't post a photo or change a relationship status. It was theirs, private, sacred. But love, real love, changes how you move through the world. And soon, it started to show. Jake noticed it when Connor started waiting for him at the door before heading to a shoot. Not in a hurry, just there, wanting to walk out together. Connor noticed it when Jake made dinner for the first time in months, burning the rice but smiling more than he had in weeks. They laughed more, talked more, even argued better, not to win, but to understand. Jake, who once lived by structure and predictability, found himself softening around the edges. He began seeing love as less of a plan and more of a process, something you build day by day. No formula, no perfect diagnosis. Connor, the dreamer, started showing up more grounded. He started writing down appointments, setting alarms, even folding the laundry without being asked, because he knew how much it mattered to Jake. Little things, the kind of things people do when they're not just in love, but invested in it. And yet, embracing change also meant confronting fear. Jake couldn't ignore the voice in his head, the one that whispered, "What if we ruin this? What if crossing that line meant they couldn't go back?" Connor heard that voice too. So one night, sitting under the glow of their kitchen lights, Jake asked the question that had been sitting in his chest like a stone. "Are we really ready for this?" Connor looked up, putting down his camera, his expression open and quiet. "I don't think love is about being ready," he said. "I think it's about being willing to stay, willing to try. Willing to hurt a little, if it means growing together." Jake let those words settle, and in that moment he realized this wasn't about avoiding mess. It was about choosing the kind of mess that was worth it. Their relationship wasn't perfect, but it was honest. And for Jake, someone who had always chased perfection, that honesty felt like freedom. One afternoon, 3 months in, Connor got the call. A wedding shoot, big client. Aspen, high profile, a portfolio maker. Jake was proud, genuinely proud, but also a little nervous. Not because of the job, but because of what it symbolized. Connor's life was moving forward, expanding, changing. And so was Jake's. He had just gotten his acceptance to med school, 2 different paths. 2 huge dreams, 1 shared question. Can we keep choosing each other in the middle of all this change? That weekend in Aspen gave them an answer. Jake went with him, not as a helper, not as a tag-along. Just as support, as a partner. Watching Connor work, seeing the way he captured love through a lens, gave Jake a strange sense of peace. Because he recognized something in those couples Connor photographed. The same quiet devotion that lived between them. Not loud, not showy, but real. And when Connor turned the camera on Jake for just a moment, catching him mid-laugh, coffee in hand, sunlight on his face, Jake didn't flinch. He didn't hide. Because maybe this, all of this, was what love looked like. Not perfect, but fully present. Love isn't just what we feel, it's what we practice. In late-night talks, in small compromises. In letting someone truly see you, even when you don't feel ready to be seen. Coming up in our final act, looking back, looking forward, we'll explore what it means to build a life, not just a moment. Jake and Connor have crossed the line, embraced the change, and now, they must learn what it takes to stay in it. Because choosing each other once was brave, but choosing each other over and over again, that's love. Sometimes the most extraordinary love stories don't start with fireworks. They start with familiarity, with comfort. With knowing the exact way someone takes their coffee, and realizing one day, you want to keep making it for them. It's been 6 months since Jake and Connor crossed the line from best friends to something more. Half a year of learning how to love, not just the idea of each other, but the reality. They still live in the same apartment, still fight over what to order for dinner, still leave the bathroom light on too often. But now, they also slow dance while brushing their teeth. They leave notes on the fridge. They kiss each other good morning like it's muscle memory. The transition wasn't always smooth. There were moments of doubt, fear. Days where they questioned whether they were doing this right. But in all of that, they never questioned each other. And that made all the difference. Jake looks back now, not with regret, but with awe. Because falling in love with Connor didn't feel like stepping off a cliff. It felt like finally finding solid ground. "I used to think love was something that interrupted your life," Jake once said. "But with Connor, it's something that completes it." Connor feels the same. For him, loving Jake wasn't a detour. It was the destination he didn't even know he was driving toward. He spent years capturing love through a lens, but now he sees it every day in real life. In Jake's tired smile, in the quiet way he listens, in the certainty of his hand always reaching back. And maybe that's the point. Love isn't always loud. Sometimes it's showing up, staying in the room. Choosing the hard conversation over the easy silence. Saying "I'm not going anywhere," even when it would be easier to pull away. Jake and Connor didn't become something new. They became more of what they already were. Best friends, and now, best partners. And what they've built, it isn't just romance, it's resilience. It's trust. It's the realization that the strongest relationships aren't built in moments of perfection, but in the way we recover from the imperfect ones. They've stopped asking if this will last forever. Instead, they ask, "Are we still choosing each other today?" And so far, the answer has been yes, over and over again. So maybe this story isn't just about Jake and Connor. Maybe it's about us. Maybe it's about the people in our lives we see every day. The ones who know us too well, who laugh at our bad jokes, who hold our secrets like they matter. Maybe it's about asking ourselves, what are we afraid to admit? That someone we love might love us back? That we've already found something rare, but we're too scared to name it? That staying just friends feels safe, but not honest? Jake and Connor didn't plan to fall in love, but they allowed it. They listened to the quiet truth beneath all the noise, and when the moment came, they were brave enough to follow it. So here's the question only you can answer. Is there someone in your life who makes your heart feel like home? Someone whose presence steadies you, not because they're perfect, but because they're real? If yes, what would happen if you stopped protecting yourself from that possibility? What if, instead of guarding the line, you stepped across it, gently, honestly, bravely? Because sometimes, the love we spend our lives searching for is the friendship we already have. Up next is our final moment, a quiet goodbye, and maybe a new beginning. But before we go, take a breath. Look around. Who in your life has been there all along, waiting for you to see them differently? Jake and Connor's story isn't just a love story. It's a reminder. You don't have to search the whole world for something real. Sometimes it's already sitting next to you, sipping coffee, teasing you about your laundry and loving you in silence. Jake and Connor's story wasn't about fairy tales. It wasn't about perfect timing, or flawless love, or some cinematic twist of fate. It was about something far more real, and far more powerful. It was about courage. The kind of courage it takes to stop hiding behind the word, just friends. The kind of courage it takes to admit that your heart beats differently when they're around. The kind of courage it takes to cross the line, knowing you might lose everything, but hoping you gain something even greater. Because here's the truth no one tells you enough. The love of your life might not come crashing into your world. They might already be in it, sitting beside you on the couch, finishing your sentences, knowing your coffee order, and waiting, quietly, for you to see them differently. So before you scroll away, before you close this tab and go back to your routine, take a second. Think about the people in your life, not the strangers, not the almosts, but the constants, the ones who show up, who makes you feel known, who makes you feel safe and seen, and just a little scared in the best possible way. If you felt something watching Jake and Connor's story, maybe it's not just fiction. Maybe it's a mirror. Maybe it's a nudge. Maybe it's your moment. Now we want to hear from you. Drop a comment. Have you ever had a friendship that almost became more? What stopped you? Or what made you say yes? Your story could be exactly what someone else needs to hear. And if this story moved you, if it made you feel, think, or see love a little differently, hit that like button, subscribe, turn on notifications. Because here, we don't just tell love stories, we tell true things. About fear, friendship, and the bravery it takes to love boldly. Your story matters. And it might just be waiting to begin.